Awesome. Thanks, Dahlia. I really appreciate the chance to talk to everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm using my fancy mic and I just want to make sure that I'm good. Okay, sweet. I want to sound like a really cool radio announcer guy. Quick show of hands. Who here is an intern this summer? Awesome. Okay. Who here is calling in because they're a VC or VC associate? One. Okay, cool. All right. Just want to gauge the audience. And then who's calling in because they are in sales? All right, cool. I'm going to focus it mostly on folks that are interns. And I assume by show of hands, are folks in, raise your hand if you're in college. Okay, got it. Perfect. All right, good to understand the audience a little better. All right, so I'm going to basically split my talk into a couple of pieces. What I'm going to basically do is screen share. I'm going to first show you how I set up my email system, because I think that like having a really good email system is important to move through emails very quickly. Treating email like a game that's really fun is one way to start loving email, because I absolutely love email. Two, I'm going to walk through 25 tips for how to send a good email, really fast, rapid pace. We'll look at some examples. And then three, I'll focus on mass cold emailing, which is like if you want to reach out to a lot of people at once, here are the like tips that I'm seeing in the industry are seen as pretty effective. Because I think a lot of folks for their roles are going to be reaching out to a lot of people simultaneously and wanting to get responses. Cool. Feel free to come off mute and ask a question anytime. I'm going to be screen sharing, so I won't be able to see a lot of little faces. One thing you could do is you could press the reaction button on Zoom with like a little raise hand. That moves your little icon to the top, and then you can come off mute, and then we can have a conversation. Otherwise, yeah, let's keep things super fluid. And I'm going to dive right in. Okay, so. And then this talk is mainly for folks who use Gmail. I think that at least the first part of the talk, the email stuff is for everyone, but or the email writing tips is for everyone. But the reason I say that is because I've set up my email in a certain way that allows me to be effective, but it's primarily based on Gmail. So if you are a superhuman user, great, you're already ahead of the curve in terms of like maximizing your email system. But if you're on a Microsoft system, it could be a little bit different, but maybe there was some principles that you can apply as well. Okay, so I'm pretty obsessed with my email. I'm a total junkie. At a very high level, I think the important thing to note about creating your email system is that it's really important to have and reduce visual clutter. And so what I like to do is, instead of having just a laundry list of all my emails that come in, I like to triage them, meaning I stick them in folders that help me figure out how and when to reply to them. And I get about 250 emails a day. And so taking all of those emails and then moving them into particular folders allows me to be a lot more effective in knowing when I should reply. So this is my email inbox. And sorry, I think somebody should go on mute if they can, unless they have a question. So basically what I do is I move my emails into folders. And so my folders are today, meaning I should reply to this email today. This week is the main one for you. And I'll skip over a couple of the folders because I actually have one of my interns living inside of my email inbox. And so the question folder is if they have a question, they put it in the question folder, but probably not for most people. But basically the main folders are today, this week, read and then get rid of. A non-priority snack means I can answer it in 2 minutes or less. And so I can, when I'm just like in between meetings, I can just like pop them out really fast. And then this is the inbox. One rule of thumb is never reply to anything in the inbox. I am never allowed to reply to an email directly. I have to force myself to decide, is this an email I want to respond to today? Do I absolutely get to it today? Or is it something that I can respond to this week or even next week if I need to have another folder that's not visible for that? I use Google's multiple inboxes function to allow me to show multiple inboxes at once. And very specifically, I put my folders at the top and I put the inbox at the bottom. So every time I open up my email, the first thing I see is everything I have to reply to today. And so I have 12 emails in my today folder. These are emails that I will not go to bed until I've replied to. And so I think it's like very useful to do that. And this is in your settings. You can go to advanced, turn on or sorry, go to inbox and you can turn on multiple inboxes. Maybe I'll follow up with Dahlia to do more of a how-to guide later on to show you guys how to set up the system. But I'm more just showing the kind of ethos behind it. The other things in terms of visual clutter is I do everything I possibly can to make my email like as easy to digest as fast as possible. And so I do things like I have the compact version of it on, so it's like thinner, so I can like see more emails faster. I don't allow all of these words to be here because I don't care about seeing the words starred, snooze, and sent all the time. So I intentionally hide this guy. And so I like can maximize the chance that I see as many emails as possible. I also have some additions to my email to make things faster to reply and connect over email. So I use Mixmax as an email add-on. And what that allows me to do is several things. One thing that I think is super important is it automatically sets a reminder for me that if somebody does not reply to my email in 4 days, it boomerangs back up to the top of my inbox. So I never send an email that somebody will not reply to me on, because I will always be able to, it'll come back to me and I'll then reply back to them and say, hey, like just checking in. Have you seen my email yet? And this might sound like crazy or obsessive, but because I'm sending so many emails a day, this is how I can ensure a system that always works. And that, nobody doesn't get back to me on. The other thing that I love is read receipts, which allows you to see when, people look at your emails, how often they see them, and you can kind of talk to them, that way about it. Through Mixmax, I also have templates. And so I have dozens of templates. So when I reach out to investors, here are like 24 pre-populated emails that I've already like made for my investors. And over time, I think you'll find that like you sending a lot of the same emails over and over again, it's a lot faster to create templates for those. So those are just a couple examples of things that I do in my email inbox. A couple other little things. This is more just in the kind of, I guess I'm very obsessed with email, and I hope you will be too one day, because I think that like shaving seconds off your time in emailing every day will really add up over the course of, a month, a year, et cetera. So other things that I do, for example, are I use the archive function to get rid of emails. So I have a send an archive button and reply turned on, which means that when I send an email, let's just go back to my email really fast. When I reply to this email, it'll send and then immediately archive it as well. And I also, let's see, what are my other things I wrote down? Oh yeah. So one of the things I do a lot is I have a lot of calendar events, meaning I'm sure you guys too, you have a lot of Zoom meetings, whatever. I have a very subtle but very important filter to reduce the number of emails that I get, which is if you filter out for .ics accepted, you will not get emails when people accept your calendar invites. I assume that everyone's going to accept my calendar invite to a yes. You only care about knowing that they're not coming to your calendar event that you sent them with a decline. And so it's very subtle, but like I probably send 30 calendar invites a day. And so I hate if you send an email to like 30 people and you get 30 accepts, that's like a waste of time. So you can filter that out with .ics accepted, skip inbox, mark as read. Feel free to take a screenshot of that and do it later. I also think that you can apply labels, which is useful. So for example, if anything comes in from my legal team, I mark it as the label legal with like a hot red label, because like that's something I need to like get to immediately. And I used to have one, and I have one in my personal email for my parents, for my siblings, just so like it helps me figure out, okay, where, in all the email that I'm getting, what is the priority and how do I think about replying to this? And again, at a high level, all of this is to help organize your life and system via your email, which is sort of like the router for everything going on in your life. Okay, I'm going to pause now before I switch to the next part of the talk and just see if there's any general questions about email triaging and email systems in place. Yeah. All right. Oh, I'm going to show you guys one more setting, which I absolutely love, which is the auto advance. Okay, so what auto advance does is, I don't know, I think it's crazy that people do this, but when you reply to an email, it pops you back up to the high level part of the inbox. But actually, let's see if I can just do one or whatever. What happens when I reply to this email or when I do something with it, it auto advances to my next email. And then if I respond to this email, it auto advances to my next one. It keeps me embedded inside of the email flow. So I never have to leave the like solve this email, then this email. If you answer an email and then it pops you back up to the high level every time, and then you have to click in again, you can save a lot of time that way. All right, so with that in mind, let's talk about good email tactics. So the first set of tactics that I'm going to share are applicable in any kind of emailing you're doing with anybody, people you know, when you're hitting up Dahlia and saying, Dahlia, you're the best boss in the whole world, please give me a pay raise or whatever, you can sort of like use these tactics. Then, like I said, I'm going to go more specifically around cold emailing and sales. I'm going to go through just like a total laundry list of things. And again, feel free to take notes or come off mute and ask questions. The talk is recorded, so I guess you can look at them after as well. Okay. So the first thing I want to say is you suck at emailing. And I'm not saying you in particular because you're interns or anything like that. I'm just saying everybody in general is not good at emailing. And the best way to get better at emailing is to ask for feedback from friends and family and other people you think are good at emailing. So what I would highly recommend is take an email that you're going to send that is longer than a few sentences and send it to somebody else and say, I am trying to get better at emailing. What do you think I could do to improve this email? It's not a bad thing to ask somebody. I think it's a sign of coachability and growth that you're willing to be open to improving your email flow and system. You are going to send 100,000 emails in your lifetime. And you need to, I believe it's extremely important to be as clear of a communicator as possible, be able to get your point across, create an email that people actually want to reply to. So I think it's very important. A couple of things to keep in mind, and we'll just start going through the list now. First is get to the point. In an email, you have to ask your question, if you have a question in your email, which I assume most emails do, in the first 2 to 3 sentences. Ideally, you ask it in the first sentence. Nobody has time to read your full email. They need to understand right off the bat when a person is processing an email, right? You want to put yourself in the shoes of the person receiving the email. They need to process, why am I receiving this email? And so I always try to put the question in the first 2 to 3 sentences, and I try to keep my emails super brief. A lot of emails that I see have like 10 paragraphs. And if you look at my email inbox right now, right, this is like, I have, 129 snacks to get through. I have 12 today's to get through. I have 17 this week's to get through. Like, I know I receive 200 emails a day. Like, I'm not going to read your full email. And so it's really important to get to the point. So like, and we'll go through an example soon, but like, I put the question in the first sentence. I also think the subject line is really important, and nobody really thinks about that. So when you look at all of my emails that I have to get through, which is going to stand out to me? Well, if you see the one with the emoji, like the purple, the like purple emoji and the cow emoji, this in my list of all my emails stands out the most to me. And so visually, the recipient of the email, their eyes will be drawn to really interesting subject lines. And so as you're writing emails, you want to think to yourself, okay, the first step in the person receiving my email to like even spend time to talk to me needs to be looking at a cool subject line when they're looking at their list of all their emails to actually open it. So if you have a boring subject line that's like, hey, or like, can you help me? Or like, hello, you're not going to open that email. And so in your subject line, I'm a huge fan of weird characters, emojis, things like ampersands, enye's, like the Spanish enye. I hit up a reporter the other day and I said, intro to Senor David at Protocol. I literally, the guy's not from like any Spanish speaking country. I just put an enye in there because, it's much more likely to get a response. And I did get a response. The @ symbol, the word re, which is not a real word, are all visual cues that help you help the person say, okay, I want to open this first. It looks more visually appealing. Also, people love their own name. So pro tip, stick their name in the email or their company or their title. People love hearing their own title, and they're much more likely to open your email. So once you get over the hurdle of like an interesting subject line, and another example is I lowercase the first letter in a lot of my subject lines because visually a lot of subject lines start with a capital letter. And again, the whole point of this is just maximize the chance that the person with a lot of emails chooses your email out of the list to get to. And then once they open the email, you have a whole new problem, which is getting them to actually read the content of it. And so now we'll talk about the actual body of the email. I'm a huge fan of alternative fonts. So I and it's very subtle, but like people are used to, I don't know, what's the normal font? I think it's like sans serif or something. I change my default font to Georgia, and it's very subtle, but I think people are like more in tune to being like, okay, like something's a little bit different here. I've also seen several venture capitalists I admire have like blue letters, like they change the color of the words they use. or they like never one venture capitalist I love, Hunter Walk, he never capitalizes a letter ever. Like in anything that he does, it's all lowercase, and everyone knows that about him. And his emails feel more interesting to me. Subtle, but like helps people reply and see a difference in your email. Other things you can do are using PSs. And so let me see if I have this one. So if you're sending a long email to somebody that has a lot of stuff, what I would highly recommend is putting as much content as possible below your signature, even if it's part of the actual email. So by sticking a like PS down here, even if I just went like this, I'm just going to take the whole, like the body of a very long email, and I'm just going to say like, hey, Elizabeth, you know, how are you? Warmly, Max. PS, everything else. And this sounds crazy, but like the person then feels like, oh, okay, like this is a really short 3-sentence email. And then they're going to like be like, okay, now it's the end. So they've spent the time to actually process the short email. And then they're like, oh, there's a PS. Well, you know, who doesn't read a PS? PS is where the juicy stuff happens, you know? And so people will scroll down and then just read the entire email. And so I oftentimes, if I'm sending a long email, make it 2 sentences, sign off, and then go PS, and then everything else I wanted them to read because they'll still read it anyway. So that's another way to use PSs. I am a big fan of thinking about your sign off. My company's name is Warmly, so like we sign off everything with Warmly. I encourage you all to use Warmly too. But you know that you can like hyperlink this stuff. So like this actually hyperlinks to our website. You can also use an email signature. It's been shown that having a little logo is like more visually appealing. We also at Warmly used to build a product called Push Pull, which are sort of like business cards where you have asks and offers, and it's like a fun way for people to get to know you. And so when you think about sending someone an email, like they are more likely to reply to your email if they think you're an interesting person, especially if it's a cold email. And so the more things you can do to share who you are separate from the ask you have in your email, the more likely you're going to have the better chance you have to get somebody to reply. The other thing that gets people to reply is adding value to their life. A lot of times you send an email and you're asking them for something. Everyone's busy. Nobody has time to help you. How can you go above and beyond by thinking, what is the value that I can add to this person's life? Well, with these like push pull cards as one example, it's a list of things that I'm willing to help other people with. And so when I email somebody, oftentimes they'll be like, should I reply to this person? And then they'll say, okay, this guy at the bottom writes ways we can actionably help each other. And they go to my link and they're like, oh, wow, you can help me with an email triaging system. You can add value in my life. Now I'm going to reply to you because I think you're interesting. One classic mistake that I see a lot of mostly college kids do, but I think a lot of people do this is they start an email to somebody with hello, you know, hey, or hey, whoever, my name is Max Greenwald, and blah, 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 blah. It's so funny to me because when you get an email from somebody, like, you know, whatever, I'm getting an email from Greg or from Graham. I know it's Graham. It says right here, it says their name. Why would anyone rewrite their name over again? You're wasting valuable real estate at the most important thing, which is the first couple sentences. So small pro tip for those who, and it's okay, because I see a lot of people doing this where they start writing their own name. That's what you do in a letter. Like back in the olden days, which I think must have happened from like how we transitioned from letter writing to emails, is that people would write, my name is Max Greenwald, blah, blah, blah. Like no, people can see your name when they process the email, so you don't need to have that. All right, pause for another second, give it another minute for questions, and then I have a bunch more tips I'm gonna get to. But hopefully like this is getting your guys gears turnings for how to architect your emails in ways to maximize the chance of response with that idea of first is the subject line, then is the body. Time for a question or two, and then I'll go back to it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So instead of doing the hi, my name is blah, 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 and giving like a small blurb, what is like, I guess as a student reaching cold outreach to like someone who is of more authority, like, do you think just getting straight to the point and asking like what I want is too much, and should I give like some sort of introduction? And if so, like how should I do that in a way that's more interesting?
Great question. I mean, what I hear in your desire to give an intro is that the belief that like the person receiving the email wants to know who you are, and by learning about who you are is more likely to respond because they think that you're interesting or like a nice student that they want to like help. I think that there's opportunities to do that later in the email, but I think that the most important thing is getting right to the ask. And I think it's like a lot of people with like higher authority love being seen as mentors. So I think like framing it as, hey, blank, you're a mentor I admire, period. Could you spend 11 minutes on a call with me? And I say 11 because don't ever use a round number. People's eyes glaze over when you're like 30 minutes. But if you say 17 minutes, they're like, what the hell? Why would I 17 minutes? That's weird. But sure, I guess I'll respond to you and spend 17 minutes on a call with you. But like start with the ask, so that at least they have a framing of like, okay, this is a student who admires me. I'm seen as a mentor. They want to call with me. Then it's okay, well, why would I get on a call with them? And then it's like, here's an article I read of yours that I think is really great. And here is what it would mean to me if you talk to me, and maybe I can organize a talk with 30 other students. So then in their head, they're like, okay, like I can add in one 17.3 minute call, I can talk to 30 students maybe, or what, if you're like trying to get them to be a speaker or something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. One more question or I'll dive right back in.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So I know how you mentioned that you have a setting where it reminds you if someone hasn't responded in a certain number of days, and so you can follow up. For doing cold outreach, when you're not getting a lot of responses, after you follow up once, do you typically not follow up again if they don't answer, or is there a certain amount of time you should follow up before you stop?
I mean, typical salespeople reach out 7 times until you like unsubscribe or go away. And that's like crazy, but like fine. I think that adding value in your replies is good. I think like just replying with a like, so anyway, typically it depends on the importance level of the person, if you're doing it in an automated sequence way or not. But generally, like I would recommend you wait 4 days for the first one, 3 days for the next, and then maybe a week and a half for the next. And your replies, there's like lots of clever, creative, you can just Google search like creative ways to get people to reply on follow-ups, but adding images and adding value in some way to them, I think is good. But yeah, I think it's fine to just reply over and over again. Other things that I do is that I sometimes change the subject line. So I send an email, no one replies. 4 days later, it comes back to me. I'm like, okay, I need to hit him up again. I then change the subject line and I put in brackets in the beginning of the subject line, like, did you see this question mark? And then, then I like put my reply. And so it actually, instead of being a multi-threaded email, where basically in Google, it shows as like, five emails in the same thread, it actually shows up as a new email altogether. So it's new in their inbox, but they also feel guilty because it feels like they haven't replied. And so they have to get back to them. I mean, you can also stick the word RE colon or forward colon in the beginning of your subject line, even if it isn't a forwarded or replied to email, to make them believe that there was like part of a chain or people that replied, which is a good segue to a couple of like quick, cold email tactics that I think are really cool. Actually, I posted about this on LinkedIn, which is like genius cold email outreach. I hate it because it totally got me to reply. This is like my mindset though, as a founder, but like I do a lot of intros, right? And so this cold emailer asked for a pretended that it was a warm intro, right? So a warm intro is somebody who like emails one person or another. And so they said intros : Max and Daniel. And so it's like, oh, like is somebody introing me? It's like, no, like Daniel's introing himself to me, like you sneaky bastard. Then he used like social proof. He took someone that I knew, which is the name of my VC. And he goes, James Courier put warmly on my radar. Like, he never talked to James, but I could maybe interpret that as, oh, you were talking to my venture capitalist. And so he told me to reach out to you. Genius. And then he said, I'm going to do some pro bono applied behavioral science work for you. Pro bono, I'm like, oh, free, like free consulting. That sounds good. And then applied behavioral science. What does that even mean? He's basically just trying to sell me something, but he's like doing everything he can to get me to a call. Anyway, there's a bunch of other cool things I thought were really good. The other thing is title, especially for sales folks. A lot of like founders are like trained to look for sales titles and then hit delete. And so by calling himself a managing director or like some sort of weird title, it like sounded important to me, even though I think he was like a sales SDR. And I mean, that's okay. And I just think that like you can play with title your own title to be different than everybody else. I mean, a lot of like what getting a response to a cold email is figuring out how you're different than everybody else, and how to make your email stand out so you're more likely to get a reply. Another tip that I have for folks is if you're emailing an important person, try emailing them late at night or on the weekend. You might be working 9 to 5, but please snooze your email to send it to them at like 10:30 p.m. I'll tell you when I'm in back-to-back meetings all day. Like if I look at my calendar right now, I'm in back-to-back meetings from 9 to 5. Don't have time to look at emails. If I did have time to look at emails, I would never reply to a cold email. But if I'm lying in bed at 11 p.m. scrolling on my phone on Twitter and an email pops in from somebody, it's a solo event. I'm like much more likely to like be like, okay, let me check out this email and reply to it. So whenever I email somebody who's super busy, I always do usually like 11:15 p.m. their local time when they're not, because they're not going to be in meetings, but they're probably getting their email done. They're probably getting their shit done. Or on like Sunday evenings is another good time too, because they're just more likely to have the time to do it. Okay, we are at time. So I will give you, let me see. I didn't get a chance to get to my mass emailing tips, but real quick, I really like Apollo to find emails, Mixmax to templatize and send emails at scale. I recommend folks have a hypothesis, meaning if you're going to send an email to 100 people, before you do it, tell yourself what % of people are going to reply to this email. What % will open the email because of the subject line? What % will actually click the button? And you need to hold yourself accountable to your hypotheses, because oftentimes you'll spend a ton of time on an email campaign. You'll get like 3 responses and go, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. And so I think hypothesis-driven mass email campaigns are good. And then also try some dangerous ones. Email someone and say like, your rent is past due, like reply to this email. I know that sounds scary, but like it's not a bad thing to really push yourself outside of your comfort zone and send something outrageous to see what kind of response you get. And you may get a lot of people being like, take me off your mailing list, like screw you. But like, I think that's fine because you're like testing and learning and stretching the bounds of your creativity in terms of your unique emails that you're going to send. And the last tip I'll give you before we leave is change your name. So my name is Max. It's not Maximus, but I found a 9.5% higher email response rate on cold emails to a more unique name. So I have changed my name to Maximus Greenwald, and it works. And honestly, I like the name better, but feel free to use your name. Like I'll call Quali out again. I think you have one of the coolest names I've ever heard. I would absolutely respond to a cold email from your name because it just sounds interesting. So, okay, that's kind of my general tips. I can take another minute or two of questions if folks have it, but if you have to jump, no worries.
Max, you are amazing. And I forgot to say this in the intro. I've known him for almost like 10 years, almost like maybe 8 or 9. We went to Princeton together and we have a couple of Princeton students in the crowd. So thank you for that. I learned so much. I am a failure when it comes to email, and I did not know that until 30 minutes ago. So
No problem, Valen.
Any final questions from the group? I have one, if no one else has one, which is just, we've done a lot of cold outreach, and I'm curious, like, what is a good open rate, response rate, if we're doing something like Apollo to, 2, 3, 4, 500 people, and any final tips for when using Apollo, how we can make that more effective?
Well, okay. So at a high level, like putting yourself in the shoes of the person receiving an email, one of the things I see a lot of mistakes on for cold email is talking about your feature or your product. And so people will say like, use presently, like we have cool features. And it's like, nobody, like people like don't care about presently, they care about the problems presently solved. And so putting the words in the framing of, I'm going to send you an email that answers a problem that you have. So like using the wording of like, man, like it must be hard for you to whatever, like, what if you had this to solve your problem kind of thing. So I think like that kind of framing messaging is good. The other thing is like people are social creatures and they want to like, feel valued and like that they matter. And so saying like 3 people have viewed your profile on presently is going to have like a 10 times better open response rate, even if you don't even have profiles, or like, your friends send gifts 19% more than other people. Like just like random stuff like that makes them think about their friends and their family and like, you know, getting invited to exclusive clubs and stuff. Like that's the kind of psychology that get people to like really open and respond to stuff, which isn't exactly answer your question, but it's just like sort of the psychology of the wording you use. I guess with Apollo for a 300 person campaign, I think, I mean, Derek, you're on the call, right? What's our best performing a cold email outreach campaign for Warmly? Is it like, I think it's something like, is it 70% open and 12% or 15% reply?
The last I looked, the highest performing one was 72% open rate and 16.5% click-through rate.
Okay.
Which is much higher than the normal types of campaigns you're going to be running. That was just like the number one win for us. But yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, we have a lot of tips and a lot of things to try. We're not even, you know, it's totally normal that 85% of people are just going to delete your email. But anything you can do to keep them around, and really like it's a foot in the door, right? Like the subject line is just a foot in the door to get them to hook them a little bit to open up the email. The first line, the first thing, the sentence of the email is just a foot in the door to get them to read the second sentence. Your goal in a first cold email is not to get them to buy your product. Your goal is to get them to reply. And the goal then the next email is just to get a meeting. And the goal of the meeting is just to get a second meeting. And so if you keep that in mind, you know, I think what sometimes I receive cold emails where it's like, buy my product, click here. And I'm like, I don't know you. I don't trust you. Like, I'm not ready to make that emotional commitment to you. So like, how do you like slowly, iteratively just get a little bit of reply and get them to commit to you? Because if you can get a reply, then like you're much more likely to get them to a yes, as opposed to going for gold from the first outreach.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Max. You were awesome. Y'all, I'll be sending out a recording for everyone who RSVP'd. If you did not RSVP, just go to getpresently.com/speakers. Drop your name and email in there and I'll send you the recording after this. But thank you and hope you all have a great weekend. Thanks so much, Max.
Before everyone jumps, I posted a link to get our product Warmly in the chat if you want. It's free for everyone. You can make these really cool backgrounds above your head. This is more about how you get people to a yes when you get on a meeting with them. But hopefully we think about it like sort of like an email signature, but in your background. So.